Blue Flamingo is a digital marketing and advertising agency. We are across Africa, and we also work a lot in North America and Canada specifically. And we're 11 years old, and we have been building strategies for companies for a very long time. And we look at the holistic so everything from like your social to your search to your mobile, all the way through to how you're engaging your customer through techniques like apps and services of software. So it's really a very holistic sort of way of looking at digital. Now, obviously, I want this to be super useful. So we're talking about digital engagement strategies in a pandemic. So again, a lot of the information I'm going to share with you is super current. It's coming out of a lot of strategies that we've been implementing over the last couple of months. And I feel like if you implement a lot of these things, that you're really going to see some amazing traction. And you are going to see that with digital marketing, it's really about one thing. So I'm going to jump straight into it, because this presentation is really not about me. It's about, hoping you get a lot of really good information from what I want to share with you. So this is an oldie but goodie. You've likely seen this 100 times, but it's one of those things that really I cannot stress enough. You've heard this a million times. Netflix didn't kill Blockbuster. Ridiculously late fees did, right? Uber didn't kill the taxi business. Limited access and fare control did. So technology by itself really is not the disruptor. It's not. What is the disruptor is not being customer centric. And this doesn't change in a pandemic. When you're trying to engage your audience, understand what your audience wants from you and how best to give that to them, it's really about being at the heart of what the customer wants. So again, this is not new to you. We've all been through awareness, interest, consideration. How do we take our customer through that channel? And the typical sort of funnel is really this very straight-laced, super nice model where everything works in tandem. And unfortunately, that's just not the situation right now. Your customer could be sitting at awareness and moving all the way through to purchase and skipping some of these stages. Or they could be going through so many different things. So when you think about yourself and a typical customer, you're going to see some advertising. You're going to engage with some search engine optimization tactics that are out there. You're going to interact with some blogs, a website. You're going to look through some reviews. You're going to call a couple of people. You're going to see something on Instagram. So the customer is really going through a journey that's uber complicated. And the heart of it for me and for our agency at Blue Flamingo and our clients is, how do we understand what the customer is feeling and how best to serve the customer? So this is a really interesting question. I love this slide because this slide just, it makes me smile, because creating anything great and being super good at digital marketing is really an emotional journey. You're going to start thinking, oh my gosh, yes, pandemic, digital marketing is, on every top of mind for everybody. Everyone's talking about it. How do I get from this point to being really great at addressing the needs of my consumer and really great at making sure that I am engaging my customer, that I am converting my customer? So you'll probably start at, this is the best idea ever. This is going to be fun. This is going to be great. And you're going to get into the dark swamp of despair, where the only thing that's going to keep you going is your family and having a really great sense of humor. And then you're going to come out this side where you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to call it a day. And then something's going to work and you're going to say, hey, wow, this is amazing. So I think that, when it comes to digital marketing and engagement strategies, keeping your customer front and center is super important, but it's also really important to remember that it is an emotional journey. You're going to feel really discouraged somewhere in the middle there when some of the tactics are not working. But the truth of the matter is, having done this for over 15 years, it really is trial and error. It's testing. Things are changing all the time. What worked last week or last month doesn't work today. So it's all about engaging with your customer, and it's all about continuing to understand the landscape. So online makes sense. The data does not lie. B2C e-commerce market size is going to be worth 6.2 trillion by 2027. Big numbers. So if you're not selling online, if you're not, attracting your customer online, then that means that the future looks pretty bleak, right? But when it comes to digital marketing, I think strategically, This slide kind of shows you that the ecosystem works really by starting with what your goals and objectives are, identifying your customers, identifying your competitors, and deciding the role. Now, the interesting thing for me when it comes to how to engage is that when it comes to deciding the role, this is where a lot of companies actually get stuck, right? It's like we don't think about who's going to do the social media, who's going to actually do it. Who's going to actually do the content marketing, creating the blogs, the infographics, the press releases? Because all of these are the tactics that are going to keep your audience engaged. But if you don't think through who's actually going to be delivering on this work, you get stuck, right? Who's going to do the mobile marketing? Who's going to specifically look after the email marketing? Jay had a fantastic presentation, some really great tips there. But someone in your organization actually needs to be the one looking after this. And one of the biggest pitfalls I see is that we don't spend enough time deciding on the roles, assigning them, and then being really, really good at tracking and measuring if they're actually aligning with our goals and our objectives. So I think when it comes to engagement, it's really about starting with an ambition. And again, if this is stuff that you already know, it likely is, this is just a really good refresher, right? And I'm going to get into sort of the current, trends that we're seeing and how you can leverage these trends. So the digital ambition for your brand now is a really good time to hone in on what that ambition looks like and what it is, because the landscape is changing. But the truth of the matter is, if I sit here and say I have all the answers, that's going to be so disingenuous because nobody has the answers. The answers actually lie with our customers and how their appetites are changing and how their needs are changing. So taking stock of the current status is really, really important, but also your own current status. So your website, is it optimized for Google search? And I'm going to talk about some Google search trends that we're seeing currently in this time, that unprecedented time that we're going through, right? So is your site optimized for Google search and mobile? Your social channels, have you reserved a handle across all social media platforms? If before this pandemic you weren't on social media and now you're seeing all the, the stats and the data coming out, that there's a lot of people on social and you want to engage, have you actually reserved that handle? Because I'm going to be looking for you on social media. Your name needs to match what your name is across your business. CRMs in your database, defining how and where you're going to capture your customer data is so critical right now. And then channel planning. I talked about this before, but roles are not just who's going to do what in your business. It's also roles are which channel does what and which one do you invest on and build. I've run strategies where we've literally focused on email marketing and, maybe LinkedIn at the exclusion of any other social media platform because it just works for that customer, right? So the key is don't be everywhere because you can't. Focus on quality, not quantity. Traffic on your website is paramount, and a true relationship with your end user really matters. And I think that sometimes we overcomplicate the issue, right? A true relationship with your end user could be you have data of your current customers, you have phone numbers. Pick up the phone and call random 10 of them and ask them what social media platforms they use. How do they engage with you on digital? What would serve them best? So sometimes it's to really uncomplicate that process and not think through this lens where it's so super hyper complex, right? It's as simple sometimes as picking up the phone and talking to your customer and then using that data to then build out, right, what your plan becomes on digital. So really critical to do that. So we talked about the roles of each channel and just an overview. Obviously, your website hosts a lot of your brand and your product information and your e-commerce and all the sort of lead magnets that you would have to attract your customer. Facebook is great for your everyday conversations, but right now, as you'll see, e-commerce is moving to social through social selling. So we have our shops on Facebook. Instagram is now allowing us to sell. So it's really important to also figure out how the e-commerce part of that works. Instagram is a great source of inspiration. Twitter works great for events and just, live engagement. YouTube is a fantastic video content hub. And of course, search works great for discoverability. So being really super clear on the role of each channel really allows you to engage with them in a way that is meaningful and in a way that the user actually uses the platform. So that's a really good consideration to just keep in mind. So I like to think when I'm doing my engagement strategies, I obviously have to prioritize because you can't be everywhere. So it's really critical to define that roadmap and then execute against it. So how do we build the foundation, right? Your website, your social media platform, and then how do we outline the customer sales journey for your business? And this again is as simple as being creative about it. I'll give you an example. We worked with a B2B company, and what they did is simply send out an email with a reward attached to 5 customers who would come in and just sit and be like a case, like a focus group around how they would actually be able to plot out their customer journey, right? So these guys came in, they were getting rewarded for it. They sat down and they just had a conversation. And now you can do that on Zoom. It's much easier. You can have these engagements, right? Where the customer actually helps you build the foundation for what your sales journey actually looks like. So as simple as that. Then driving awareness and demand generation. So defining your digital objective, we've talked about that, your target audience, your KPIs. What's your annual marketing budget? What does that look like? How much do you want to spend? And then focus on maximum 2 platforms to begin, right? So you can test and learn. This is super crucial because sometimes we take on too much, right? You're trying to eat the whole elephant at the same time. And the idea is if you focus on maximum 2 platforms, you start your advertising, you test and you learn as you go, you really start to see some real wins in those areas, right? And then you can then extrapolate this to sort of more platforms. And then developing some really great optimized ads, which is key to driving results. So defining that roadmap and executing is building your foundation, driving awareness and demand generation, and then really looking at the conversion side. So sometimes we really want to skip through some of these steps. You really want to just say, I'm online, I want to convert immediately. But the idea is that going through the necessary sort of pain points to get to that part where you can drive your conversions and you can learn and you can do that online or offline, you can measure, you can optimize, is really critical to making sure that your engagement strategies are working. So define that roadmap and really, really execute against it. So digital marketing excellence levers. Now, I like this slide because it really speaks to what levers are we going to pull on so that we can be excellent at digital marketing. And I think, when we look at how the user engages with us, how we're engaging with the user, there's certain things that are enablers and certain things that are sort of these growth levers, right? And these are the tactics that enable our strategy. So let's look at customer acquisition. You really want to acquire as many customers as possible. You want consideration and traffic. You want lead conversion. What engagement tactics work really well for you to actually access this growth lever and be able to really say, I'm driving traffic to my website, I'm converting. So search engine marketing is really good at that. Social media advertising. You've got your landing page optimization. We're talking about that when we're talking about email marketing earlier. That's really important. And just the buy flow design. How do people buy from you, right? And SEO. So those are kind of the initial levers. So everything in pink here is like your initial levers that you'll employ in the beginning. And then when you get into enablers, it's things like how do you transform your internal processes, right? Your partnerships, who's doing like your media buying and stuff like that. So these are all things that enable what you're already doing, your technology, your customer data, performance tracking and reporting. These are all things that enable a really, really great strategy. And like I said, the items in pink are really what you initially sort of pull on. And then once you've gotten really good at getting those initial levers employed and you're pulling on those levers, you then go in and address things like online video and addressable TV. You personalize experiences and messaging. And you get really sophisticated with some of the levers that you're pulling on to really be excellent at your digital marketing. So I think all in all, in terms of engagement, you also want to make sure you have a tiered approach so you don't get exhausted in the beginning and just find everything is really overwhelming. What I really like as well, and now getting sort of into the trends that we're seeing, is that Facebook has really shifted some social objectives to addressing business challenges. So initially we talked about, the fact that Facebook is really great for starting conversations, and we've kind of come from this vanity metrics area where how do I get more fans, more likes, more comments, more shares? What's a best in class social strategy? But if you look at how the pandemic has shifted a lot of e-commerce strategies and a lot of the trends, we're now getting more into conversions with social. And social selling has actually become super critical, and the ROI is actually showing up. So Facebook is not just for awareness anymore. We're talking about things like, I've got a new product launch coming up. How does Facebook help me drive awareness to that? I need to increase my direct-to-consumer business. How can Facebook help drive actions on my website, right? So these are becoming really critical conversations to have. I need to communicate with my customer. What's the most effective way to do that? How do I reach them on Facebook? So really, really critical to look at that shift and how that's affecting digital marketing strategies and engagement strategies overall. So again, Facebook campaign objectives have this sort of purchasing funnel as well, where when we look at awareness, there's reach and video views. When you're looking to generate leads, it's really, you can do that on Facebook and really generate that demand and clicks to your website. Look at online sales and how those are sending, visitors to your website for conversions. You can acquire mobile app users through app installs. And when it comes to remarketing as well, we're able to really tap into that transactional side where we can remarket. We can look at store visits. We can look at app engagements, product catalog sales, and so on and so forth. So that purchasing funnel, when you think about how you're engaging your user, you also want to make sure that it's bespoke from each channel that you're looking at. So there'll be one for Facebook, there'll be one for Instagram. So the idea is to really look at how am I actually looking at the funnel based on the platform and then really getting in touch with my user. For example, video views on Facebook perform really, really well. We know video is number one right now, right? For engagement. And it's actually driving a lot of conversions over and above still images and any other kind of medium. So that's really interesting. Just to give you some case studies to look at. So HealthCart used a full funnel strategy to guide people from discovering their product to considering their product to converting. Now, why this is great is because at each of those touch points, you're engaging your customer, right? And the idea is that with the media through to the outcomes, it's about how do you create that awareness, the consideration, the intent, and then the purchase. So really looking at, how with their media, they optimize for video views. And then once they optimize for video views, it was really about how does the target group then, actually get targeted down to like reach and frequency. They went as far as to go into things like the vernacular, the slang, so that the video was really, really specific in terms of engagement strategies. And then they measured and looked at their creatives, and the outcomes were really great. So you have an 11-point lift in ad recall. So that just means the way in which people were actually recalling the ad was really high, right? But it's about looking at that funnel and how you actually target your customer from awareness through to consideration, intent, and purchase. So getting into the fun part now, looking at some of the trends that we're seeing with the pandemic and how you can actually really leverage these trends to actually create some real sort of traction within your business. So the first trend that I'm going to talk about is in-person store visits. So we all know in-person store visits nearly eliminated. Everybody's at home. We're shopping at home. So what are some of the areas in which or some of the areas in which when it comes to in-person store visits, we can actually really leverage when it comes to digital engagement strategies? So we've talked, ad nauseum about websites, but now more than ever, web maintenance really, really matters. That's the foundation of your online existence. It's what ties all things digital together. It's where you're going to be doing a lot of your e-commerce. But that being said, you want to make sure that the site is actually really, really optimized and running smoothly. That makes, making sure your site speed is up, making sure that, your landing pages are refined, because that really affects your sort of PPC efforts. And that's where all your ads are leading to. So web maintenance now more than ever, super critical. And then Google My Business. You want to make sure you get your business listed on Google with the physical visit really being eliminated. Also, you really need to make sure that, you've updated like things like your business hours, your address, you're posting photos, as well as reviews. Those are really, really important that they're properly and accurately displayed, because it's important to make sure that you're getting the right information to your customers, because things have changed. But however, people are still looking and are still searching. So social media and e-commerce. I think, when you look at social selling really going up during the pandemic, look at the fact that social media sites are really optimizing the efficacy of like ensuring that small businesses are actually able to sell online because of the fact that physical store visits have been eliminated. It's really important to take advantage of that, right? You want to make sure you're staying active and also strategically. So social is a tool of communication, but also the bulk of your digital marketing strategy now being altered a lot of the trends are showing that this is where you actually need to spend a lot of your time. So being active helps to also build trust with your customer. It does let them know you're still open, you're still conducting business. Really, really huge. And the e-commerce component really comes in when you look at social selling. And then, of course, pay-per-click. To put your business in the best position for success, you want to adjust how you meet your customers' new needs, and you want to make sure that you're meeting them with, your e-commerce strategy, because that's purely tied to your PPC. You want to be driving people to your website, and you want to be proactive about it. So you've got your foundation pieces in place. Your website's working. You've updated your Google business. You're doing your social. Now, when it comes to really pushing them, you want to make sure that you take advantage of all the PPC avenues. So areas to really look at to promote yourself is like paid ads, your Google ads, your Microsoft ads, Facebook, as well as other strategies and other outlets like Instagram and LinkedIn. But it just goes back again to where your customer is. So pretty crucial to find that out. So another trend is really, this is what we're seeing, is that online searches are dominated by COVID-19. And that just makes sense. Your customer is curious. They want information. There's a lot of fear surrounding COVID-19 and the pandemic, and it's important to really find out how the search is actually being affected. Now, I find this fascinating because I'm a data geek generally, but what we're finding is that, number one, you really want to make sure that you're looking at your search query reports, right? So what we do internally is that we have a lot of data that we're sitting on for our paid search campaign. So what we're doing is that we're adjusting our paid search campaign for new search terms, because what's happening is that your user isn't searching the way they were before. And there's new search terms and new volumes that are coming in. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing those search terms regularly to really understand what sort of traffic that you're getting, right? And the second one is negative keywords. So alongside running your PPC campaign, you want to make sure that now more than ever, you're running more frequent search query reports. So what you're doing is that you're adding the right negative keywords to your campaigns. So because they could be affecting your campaign. So there's all this new traffic coming in. People aren't searching the same way. So you want to eliminate some of the negative keywords from your PPC campaigns because the trends are changing. And of course, the third one is consistently following trending searches. So Google Trends is a really effective tool to dissect and understand how people are searching. And they've included a new hub specifically related to coronavirus search trends. And I love that because you can review on a regular basis to see how people are prioritizing within their searches. And that helps you filter through your keywords when you're building out your PPC campaign. So really critical piece of data there to make sure that you're using that tool, because we found it really effective in terms of how people are searching and just basically how we're also, navigating the space to make sure that we're being relevant and that we're actually making sure that we're being found in the right spaces and the way in much the way that the customer is actually searching for you. So super critical. So we've talked about online searches being dominated by COVID, and we've sort of talked through the negative trends and the searches there. But there's also declining mobile traffic. And I find this fascinating, but it makes sense. We're all at home. So desktop traffic is actually going up. A lot more people spending time on their computers, in front of Zoom calls for work. So it means that, we also need to adjust the way in which we're engaging with the customer. So if you're engaging with the customer, then what are the things you're looking at or looking for? What are some of the solutions to this trend? So when it comes to declining mobile traffic, it's really looking at device bid adjustments and smart bidding. So what does that mean? When we're bidding and we're running our PPC campaigns, or we're running any sort of, paid media, or we're creating content, we're really creating for certain devices. And we've really come into the space where we're creating a lot of content for desktop. Now, the interesting thing is that we now have to adjust in the reverse, right? Because generally you're looking at making this kind of adjustment based on specific data. But the interesting thing is now, due to the pandemic, you're taking into account that more users are going back into their desktop. So you want to do smart bidding in your campaign. So your PPC strategy is really going to become super important in terms of you being able to, change how the customer is finding you. So it's going to become more difficult to know how search behavior will change abruptly, which means that we're going to have to not leave our campaigns to run for weeks on end without checking in. It's going to be a day-to-day check-in so that you can actually adjust your bids based on the devices. So if mobile traffic starts to pick up again, that's great. But because it's declining now, we really want to keep adjusting as we go. And then the idea of smart bidding is also super crucial right now. You want to make sure that you're bidding not automatically, if you can avoid that. You want to make sure that when you're bidding, you're actually bidding by looking at the data and adjusting as you go. So that's super crucial as well. So in a nutshell, what does the outlook tell us? It's that there are no roadmaps for navigating this new world that's really being disrupted by the virus as we find it. As the crisis evolves, we're all responding to the best of our ability, and we're literally making this road as we go. We're building this plane as we're flying it. But then again, I think the beauty of it is that sort of flexible, context-based approach is exactly what we do on a daily basis as digital marketers, right? We're driven by data, we're driven by the information, and that's how we've been enabling digital marketing for the last so many years. So it's also really comforting to know that this is probably the best media right now that you can use and learn as you go and learn really, really quickly. So just to recap, I think it's really to remind you that, in-person store visits have been nearly eliminated. So you really want to look at how you are adjusting for that in terms of looking at your web maintenance, your e-commerce, your social strategies. Those are really critical right about now. Online searches are dominated by COVID-19. So how are you bidding? How are you looking at your keywords? How are you removing your negative keywords? That's super, super critical. And mobile traffic is declining. So how smart are you being about your bid adjustments and your smart bidding? And when you get all these things and think about how you are thinking about the customer, you're really going to be able to engage with the customer. You're really going to be able to find the customer where the customer is and actually deliver for them in the best possible way. So Ken, I'm going to get back to you at this point and see if we have any questions.
A couple of them, and I'm not going to do them with the worst fake South African accent I can imitate. So I won't do that. But I am curious because you're in beautiful South Africa. What's the COVID situation there now? I mean, it's different in so many different parts of the world. And somebody had asked me that, seeing you coming up to speak, and I was curious because what we see in Europe versus the middle part of the U.S. versus California and New York, for example, it's so much different everywhere all over the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so true. I'm going to say that we are the worst hit in Africa. Absolutely. So South Africa has had a pretty serious lockdown, to be out or go or move around and trading. But I think we're in a pretty sweet spot right now. I mean, most of business is reopened. Things are not normal by any stretch of the
Right,
imagination,
right.
but there is some activity. So I think we're probably in a sweet spot right now,
Well, and
hoping for things to get.
yeah, and part of what triggered me to ask that one first was something you said towards the very end, that in-store visits weren't there. And here in the US, for example, it's opened up a lot more. Now, there are a lot of lockdowns, and we've seen within the last few weeks a lot of shutdowns in certain parts of the country where the pandemic has exploded. But there are a lot of places that are really doing quite well,
Mhm.
considering all things considered.
All things considered.
All things considered. Yeah, I mean, put some air quotes around everything I just said, but there is a change, and I'm curious if you're seeing, and it's what part of the question was, is where are you starting to see things open up from the perspective you bring from the southern end of the earth?
Yeah. So it's interesting. We're seeing a lot of people, there's this kind of air of wanting things to go back. So there's almost an air of hope, if you would. And I think that we're seeing like a lot of people are just tired of being at home. So restaurants, for example, are just doing really well right now. People just want to get out and do something different and experience something different. Just the difference between what we've been experiencing and what the reality is now is where we're seeing some trends and some shifts. So absolutely, anything to do with entertainment, anything to do with just sort of relieving, I guess, the stress that we've been under, which is a considerable amount, is kind of doing really well right now. I mean, gyms that are practicing social distancing are also seeing a resurgence. So I think it's this idea of wanting to go back to a sense of normalcy that's sort of coming back.
Yeah, things like Peloton sales are through the
Yeah,
roof.
absolutely.
But home services is doing well other than just home gyms. And another one that I saw today, but you talk about that pinup demand that people have is one of the major cruise ships put out offered a test, and they've gotten over 100,000 people sign up wanting to take an exploratory cruise, to test to see how all this works with people having, having a safe voyage on a cruise, which I think is fascinating. So we've got a
Yeah.
question here from Kristen also, who says, any suggestions on how to increase followers and ones we want on LinkedIn? They're a healthcare B2B startup. Fantastic question.
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. And I think, when you want to increase followers, for me, Ken, and I'm sure you agree with me, it always starts with the objective, right? Why do you want to increase those followers? What is it that you want those followers to do? So if it's about increasing your leads and it's about increasing the amount of revenue you're making for your company, then it's also got to be about you really offering something, right? Because digital is that platform where seek first to understand, right? Then to be understood. That's the golden rule. So it's almost like, what are you offering them in order for them to follow you? So is it great content? Is it helpful content? Are you providing some sort of value along a decision that they're struggling with? If you're in the healthcare industry, then, is it important information to them? Because once your lead magnets are really strong and you really understand what you're offering them for free, in quotes, then you're able to really build a community around that. So when I'm asked the question, how do I increase my followers? I always answer that with why. Why do you need to increase your followers? Because then it's like, you go down the rabbit hole. So I want to increase my followers because I do want to make more revenue. I want to make more revenue, so when you start to answer those questions and you start with that objective, right? The strategy becomes really clear, because you don't want to just increase your followers for vanity metrics. You actually want to have a tangible objective at the end of the day that helps you answer that need. So working backwards, I would say to Christian, is understand the objective super clearly. When you have an exponential increase in followers, what does that then do for your business, right? So it really starts with the objective.
Last question. This one's just for me. What time is it there?
It's 10 minutes to 10 p.m.
Okay, good. Perfect. Well, you can go to bed now. That was a fantastic presentation.
Thanks
So
so much.
thank you very much. Stay safe and have a great evening.